"Dip the standard," the delegation officer said to me, low and certain, as though he were correcting a clumsy waiter. "When their flag passes, you lower it. That is the courtesy in our country, Captain, and I expect it here." He did not look at me when he said it. He looked at the colors. The regimental standard my ensign was holding rigid at the head of the receiving line, 12 feet of pole, and a heavy square of crimson silk worked through with gold. And he looked at it the way a man looks at something he intends to own. I had been the officer of that guard for 11 years, and in 11 years no one had ever told me to dip those colors. They do not dip. That is not a tradition or a preference. It is the one fixed point the whole forecourt is built around, and every man under my command would have stepped off the edge of the world before he let that silk drop a single inch toward another nation's flag. But the delegation officer did not know that yet, and the band was already tuning, and the visiting party's motorcade was 4 minutes out from the lantern gate, and he had said the word "expect" to me as though it settled the matter. So I want to tell you exactly what was going through my mind behind a face that, I am told, showed nothing at all, because the easy story is that I simply refused and the heavens opened. The true story is harder and slower, and, I think, better, and it is the reason I can still stand in that forecourt without flinching. My name does not matter for this. Call me the captain of the forecourt guard, because that is what I was, and it is the part of me that mattered that morning. The household I served is not one you will find on any map. I will not name it, and I would not if I could, but you know the shape of it. An old stone palace above a river, a forecourt of gray cobbles raked smooth before dawn, a gilded screen of iron at the far end where the public press their faces between the bars, and at the center of it, all the men in red who do not move. That morning we were 40 strong on the cobbles, in 2 facing ranks with the receiving carpet between us, the standard at the head, and the band massed under the colonnade to the left. A state arrival, the kind of morning the whole household exists for. The visitor was the head of a foreign delegation. I will call it, as we called it in the briefings, the verandan party, after no place that has ever existed, come to sign a trade accord and to be seen being welcomed. With him came his own protocol staff, and chief among them was the man now standing at my shoulder in a gray morning coat with a sash across it. Mr. Sorrel, their head of protocol, who had flown in 2 days early to harmonize the ceremony, which is a phrase that means to make your country do it our way. I had spent those 2 days being very polite to Mr. Sorrel. We had walked the forecourt together. I had shown him where his principal's car would stop, where the line would form, the count of paces from carpet's edge to the foot of the great stair. He had nodded at all of it, made small adjustments I could honor, and I had honored them because that is the work, you bend on the small things so the great things stand. He had asked once about the standard. I had told him plainly that it did not lower. He had smiled and said, of course, and I had taken that smile to mean he understood. I had been wrong. The smile had meant he intended to win it later in front of an audience when it would be harder for me to say no. That is the thing about a man like Sorrel. He does not fight you in the empty room where you can both speak freely. He waits for the full room, the cameras, the band, the cars at the gate, and then he gives you an order in a quiet voice and trusts the weight of the occasion to do his arguing for him. He had chosen his moment with real skill. I will give him that. Captain, he had stepped closer. He smelled of cold air and expensive soap. Did you hear me? I heard you, I said. Then we understand each other. He turned to face the gate, satisfied, hands folded behind him, a man who had given an instruction and considered it carried out. The band's last notes of tuning died away. Somewhere beyond the iron screen, the crowd's murmur changed pitch, the way a crowd does when the first outrider comes into view, and a young constable on the gate lifted his hand to his earpiece. 2 minutes. I looked down the line. My ensign that morning was a boy named Pell, Ensign Toller Pell, 19 years old, 3 months into carrying the standard, and the proudest, stiffest, most terrified young man on the cobbles. He had the pole socketed into the leather bucket on his belt and both white gloves wrapped around it, and his eyes were fixed on the middle distance the way I had drilled into him, and I could see, even from where I stood, that he had heard every word Sorrel said. The muscle in his jaw was working. He was 19, and he was holding the one thing that does not bend, and a man with a sash had just told his captain to bend it. If I gave the order, Pell would obey it. That is what discipline means, and it is also the danger of it. He would not argue, he would not refuse. He would lower the colors because his captain told him to, and he would carry the shame of it for the rest of his life, and it would not be his shame. It would be mine. I understood that with total clarity in the space of about 3 seconds, standing on the cobbles with the cold coming up through my boots. I also understood the other thing, the thing Sorrel was counting on me not to weigh fast enough. The accord mattered. Real things hung on this morning, agreements that fed families, that I will not pretend to fully understand, that men far above me had worked at for years. And here was their head of protocol, 2 minutes from the principal's arrival, having told me that lowering a piece of silk was the price of courtesy. To refuse him now, in the open, with the cars coming, was to risk turning a trade ceremony into an incident. A small man's quiet order had been built precisely so that a sensible man would swallow it. I am not, I hope, a foolish man, but there are some things a sensible man does not get to be sensible about. I keyed the small radio clip beneath my collar, one short press, the signal that means stand by, hold the line, listen to me, and I felt rather than saw the 40 men settle a half-degree straighter. Then I turned my head just enough, and spoke to Mr. Sorrel in the same low voice he had used on me. Those colors have not dipped to any flag in 200 years, I said. They will not dip today. Your principal will be received with every honor this household has to give. That is not one of them. It does not exist to give. He went very still, and beyond the iron screen, the first motorcycle came through the gate. There is a particular sound a state arrival makes, the low burble of the outriders, the click of 40 pairs of heels coming to attention at my signal, the band's drum major lifting his mace, and underneath all of it that morning there was a smaller sound, just for me. Mr. Sorrel breathing through his nose, deciding what to do with a man who had just told him no. He decided to try again. Of course he did. Men like him always have a second instrument when the first one fails, and his second instrument was charm laid over a threat, which is the most dangerous kind because it lets the listener pretend the threat was never said. Captain, he kept his eyes forward, his lips barely moving, a smile arranged on his face for the cameras that were already swinging toward the gate. I admire loyalty to a custom, truly, but understand the arithmetic. My principal has been received in 9 capitals this year. In every one the host's standard was lowered as his flag came forward. If yours is the one forecourt where it is not, that absence will be the only thing anyone remembers of this visit. The accord, the speeches, the years of work gone, behind one photograph of a slight. You will have humiliated your own household to protect a pole. He let that sit half a second. I am trying to save you, Captain. Lower it, and no one ever knows we had this conversation. It was a good speech. I have thought about it many times since, and it was genuinely a good speech, because nearly every word of it was the kind of thing that is true enough to frighten a careful man. The accord did matter. A photograph can outlive a treaty. I had no wish to humiliate the household I had given my life to. But I had noticed the lie folded inside it, the way you notice a single off-key note in a tuned orchestra. In every one, the host's standard was lowered. I had stood post at enough state arrivals and read enough of the protocol records that live in the guardroom safe to know that this was simply not so. Standards are dipped to sovereigns by ancient and specific custom, and they are dipped in salute by some services as a courtesy at sea. But a host nation's regimental colors are not lowered to a visiting delegation's flag, not in the 9 capitals he named, not anywhere a household keeps its honor. He was not describing the world. He was describing the world he wanted me to believe in for the next 90 seconds, so that I would act before I could check. A liar tells you the room is on fire, so you will run through the door he has chosen. The discipline is not to run. The colors stay up, I said. Step back to your place now, sir. Your principal is arriving, and I will not have him met by his own protocol officer hissing at the host's captain. That photograph would be worse than any you imagine. For one moment, I thought he might actually refuse to move, might plant himself there on the carpet and force the thing into the open in front of the cars. And I had already decided what I would do if he did. But he was, above all, a careful man too, and the second car was nosing through the gate now with the little flag fluttering at its corner, and he stepped back to his appointed place with a smoothness that would have fooled anyone watching. Only I saw the look he gave me as he went. It was not anger. It was a kind of cold note-taking. "We are not finished," the look said. "I will find the lever." Then the cars were on the carpet, and there was no more time for him or for me, only for the work. I will tell you that the arrival itself was flawless, because that is the part I am proudest of. Whatever was burning under the surface, the forecourt showed nothing. The principal, a heavy, genial man who shook hands warmly and looked genuinely pleased to be there, came up the carpet between my two ranks of red, and the band gave him the welcome we had rehearsed, and at the head of the line young Ensign Pell stood with the standard absolutely vertical, crimson and gold, catching the gray morning light, 12 feet of it perfectly still above a 19-year-old who I could see was breathing as though each breath cost money. The visitor's own color party came up behind him with their flag, and as their flag drew level with our standard, the exact instant Sorrel had wanted that silk to drop, Pell held it high and true, and did not move so much as an eyelash. I watched the visitor's flag pass beneath our unmoving standard. Nothing happened. No incident. No insult given, and none, I noticed, taken. The principal himself did not so much as glance up at the colors. He was busy being delighted by the band. The slight that Sorrel had promised would define the visit existed, in that moment, only in Sorrel's own head and in mine. We received the party up the great stair. The doors closed. The band stood down, and I let myself believe for about 20 minutes that it was over, that the careful man had taken his loss quietly and we would never speak of it again. I should have known better. A man does not fly in 2 days early to lose. He found his lever at the reception, where I had no business being and where I was not, but where my colonel was, and where the household's chief of protocol was, and where Mr. Sorrel, glass in hand, leaned in close to both of them and said with every appearance of regret that he was so very sorry to raise it, but he felt they should know that during the arrival the host's captain had been openly insubordinate, had refused a reasonable, customary courtesy, had spoken sharply to a guest of the household on the carpet itself, and had, in Sorrel's careful phrasing, very nearly cost you the morning. He wondered, sadly, whether such a man was suited to so sensitive a post. I learned all this later in order from 3 different people, because that is how a palace works. Nothing said in a gilded room stays in it. But I felt the first edge of it within the half hour when a junior aide came down to the guardroom, found me checking the men off post, and told me, not meeting my eyes, that Colonel Aldous Wren wished to see me. At once, before I changed out of my forecourt order. A summons to your colonel in your ceremonial dress, before you have even stood your men down, is not a friendly summons. Every man in the guardroom understood that. Pell understood it. I saw the boy's face go white as the message landed, saw him open his mouth to say something, some hopeless 19-year-old offer to come and explain that it was him, the standard that the captain had been protecting. I put a hand flat on the air between us. Not a word. Stand your men down. This is mine. I walked up through the household to the colonel's study with the strangest feeling I have ever carried in that uniform, that I had done the one thing the whole of my training existed to make me do, held the line, refused the unlawful courtesy, protected the boy and the colors both, and that it might be the thing that ended me. Discipline does not promise you that doing right will be rewarded. It only promises you will know afterward that you did it. I held to that on the stairs, and I knocked on the colonel's door. "Come," said Colonel Wren. He was a lean, silver man who had stood the forecourt himself 30 years before me, and he was standing at his window with his back to the door when I came in, which I have learned is the posture of a man who does not yet know whose side he is on. He let me come to attention and held the silence a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he turned. "I have just had a remarkable account of my own forecourt," he said, "from a guest. He tells me my captain refused a courtesy, spoke harshly to a member of the visiting delegation on the carpet, and came within a hair of turning a trade accord into a diplomatic incident. He tells me he raises it only out of concern for the household." Wren's voice gave away nothing. He used the word insubordinate. "I would like to hear your account before I decide what to do with his." I had a choice in that instant, and I want to be honest about it because it is the hinge of the whole thing. I could have softened it. I could have said there had been a misunderstanding about protocol, that tempers ran high before an arrival, that I regretted any sharpness, all of it true enough, all of it the kind of thing that lets a careful man slide out from under a charge. It would very likely have worked. Wren was not looking for a head. He was looking for a way to make the morning quietly disappear. But to soften, it was to concede that the order might have been reasonable. And it was not. It was the one thing I would not let stand, because if I let it stand once in a colonel's study to save my own post, then the next captain on that carpet would face the same quiet voice with one less reason to refuse it. "Sir," I said, "Mr. Sorrell ordered me to dip the regimental standard to the visiting delegation's flag as their color party passed. I refused. I refused because the order was contrary to 200 years of this household's practice, and to the plain protocol of every service I know of. Our colors are not lowered to a visiting party's flag, here or in any of the 9 capitals he named to me. He told me they were. That was not true, and I believe he knew it was not true. He gave me the order 90 seconds before the principal's car came through the gate, in front of the band and the cameras, in a voice meant to be heard by no one but me, because he calculated that the pressure of the moment would make me obey before I could check the claim. I did not obey it. The arrival went forward without a flaw. No insult was given, and as far as I could see, none was taken. The principal himself never looked at the colors. The only person in that forecourt who believed an insult had occurred was the man who manufactured it. I drew a breath. "I will own the sharpness, sir." I told him to step back to his place and not hiss at the host's captain on the carpet. I would say it again. But I will not own insubordinate, because I was not given a lawful order by anyone I answer to. I was given an unlawful instruction by a guest, and I declined it, which is precisely what the post exists for. If the household decides I was wrong to refuse, then the household must decide that its standard now dips to whoever asks loudest, and someone other than me will have to stand the carpet, because I will not be the captain who taught it to bow. The study was very quiet. Somewhere below us the band was packing away. Wren looked at me for a long moment, and something in his face moved, not softening exactly, but the look of a man recognizing ground he has stood on himself. "You understand," he said slowly, "that he will not let this go. A man who flies in 2 days early to win a piece of silk does not accept a draw. He has already planted the word insubordinate with the chief of protocol. By this evening it will have reached the steward of the household and possibly higher. The account that travels fastest is the one told first, and he told his first." He paused. "You have the truth. He has the start. Those are not always the same weight." "I know it, sir." "And you refused anyway." "There was a boy holding the standard, sir. Ensign Pell, 19. If I had given the order, he would have obeyed it, and he would have carried it the rest of his life, and it would have been mine to give and his to bear. I would rather carry this." I held his eye. "I would rather carry a great deal than that." I do not know what I expected. I half expected the colonel to tell me regretfully that he agreed with me entirely and that I would nonetheless be quietly moved to a desk for the good of the accord, because that is how these things usually end. The right man thanked and removed so that the wrong man can be soothed. I had made my peace with it on the stairs. I was wrong about that too, and I have rarely been so glad to be wrong. Wren crossed to his desk, sat, and pulled a single sheet of paper toward him. "Sit down, Captain," he said. "I am not going to discipline you. I am going to do something a great deal more inconvenient for Mr. Sorrel. I am going to find out whether his account survives contact with the record." He looked up. "Because here is what he does not understand about this household. He thinks the standard is held up by you, by one stubborn officer he can have removed or overruled. It is not. It is held up by 200 years of men who agreed in writing that it would never come down, and that agreement does not answer to a glass of wine at a reception. Let us go and read it to him." He lifted the handset on his desk and spoke 3 short sentences into it to the chief of protocol, to the steward's office, and to the keeper of the household's archive. I caught only fragments: the arrival standard, the full protocol, bring the order book, and ask Mr. Sorrel if he would do us the honor of joining us, yes, now before he dines, on what he told them. He set the handset down and looked at me almost wryly. "You held the line on the cobbles," he said. "Now we hold it in the room. That is the part they never put in the drill, Captain, that the standard does not stay up by itself, and it does not stay up because one good man is willing to be broken for it. It stays up because when one man refuses, the rest of us are obliged to come and stand behind him with the book open. Otherwise his refusal is just a gesture, and the next man inherits a custom with a crack in it." He stood. "Let us go and make sure the next man inherits it whole." I followed him out and along the gallery toward the steward's rooms, and I will not pretend I was easy. Everything I had been taught told me that an officer who becomes the subject of a guest's complaint at a state reception does not usually walk away clean, no matter how right he is. But for the first time since Sorrel's quiet order on the carpet, I was not standing alone with it. There were footsteps behind me on the gallery now, the chief of protocol, 2 clerks, a man from the archive with a great leather book under his arm, and the household was beginning, slowly and without drama, to close around the thing I had refused to let fall. We reached the steward's door, and Mr. Sorrel was already inside. He had got there ahead of us, which told me a great deal. He was standing easy at the center of the steward's long room, glass set aside now, his sash still across his coat, in the posture of a man who has already told his story to a sympathetic listener and is waiting for the accused to be brought in. The steward of the household, a broad, unhurried woman named Lady Marwen, who I had served under for 11 years and had never once seen rattled, sat behind her table with her hands folded. The chief of protocol took a chair to her right. And Sorrel turned to watch me come in with that same cold, note-taking look, pleased, I think, to see me still in my forecourt dress, because a man marched before the steward in his ceremonial order looks like a man already half condemned. "Lady Marwen," he began, before any of us had quite settled, smooth as poured oil, "I am grateful you could see me so promptly. I have no wish to make trouble for a junior officer who I am sure acted from misplaced zeal. I ask only that the household understand what occurred, so that my principal's visit is not remembered for an avoidable discourtesy." The captain refused a customary lowering of the standard, spoke sharply to me on the carpet, and "Mr. Sorrel." The steward did not raise her voice. She simply spoke, and he stopped, because some people carry a quiet that other people instinctively give way to. "I have heard your account once already from the chief of protocol, who had it from you. I should not like to make you tell it a 3rd time and risk it growing in the telling as accounts do, so let us not retread it. Let us instead look at the only thing in this room that has no interest in the outcome." She nodded to the man from the archive. "The order book, please. The arrival protocols. Read the household standing instruction on the regimental standard at a state reception. Aloud." The archive clerk set the great leather book on the table, opened it to a place already marked with a ribbon. Wren's 3 sentences on the telephone had bought us that ribbon and read. I will not give you the whole of it. It is dry and long and beautiful for exactly that reason. But the heart of it was 4 lines, set down in a hand 2 centuries old and copied faithfully forward through every revision since. The standard of the forecourt guard is borne erect upon all occasions of state, and is lowered to no flag, ensign, or person save the sovereign of this house alone, and to the sovereign only in the act of accession or at the lying-in state. It shall not be dipped in courtesy, in greeting, or in salute to any visiting party, delegation, or foreign color, this being the settled honor of the house, and not within the discretion of any officer, guest, or minister to alter. The clerk closed the book. The room was silent. Not within the discretion of any officer, guest, or minister to alter, Lady Marwen repeated gently into that silence. You will note, Mr. Sorrel, that the instruction anticipated you. 200 years ago, someone in this household understood that one day a guest would stand on that carpet and ask for the standard to come down as a courtesy, and they wrote in advance that no one was permitted to grant it, not the captain you wished to overrule, not the minister you hoped would overrule him, not myself. The captain did not refuse you out of zeal. He refused you because he had no power to obey. There was never a courtesy for him to extend. You asked a man to give you something that does not belong to him, that does not belong to me, that belongs to no living person in this house. He could no more have lowered it than he could have handed you the river. Sorrel's face had not changed much. Careful men keep their faces, but I saw the calculation behind it shifting, looking for the next lever and not finding one. He tried the only thing left to him. Then the custom is at fault, he said, and the household should have warned my principal that its forecourt offers a courtesy it withholds from every guest. To enforce an old book against a friendly nation is itself a discourtesy. I will have to report that we were. You will report nothing of the kind. This, at last, from the chief of protocol, and there was iron under it, because you were warned. The captain tells me he stood with you in that forecourt 2 days ago and told you plainly that the standard does not lower, and that you answered, of course, of course. Do you deny it? A pause. I do not recall the exact. He recalls it, and I believe him because it is in his nature to warn a man, and it is in yours to wait for the crowd. You knew the standard would not come down. You asked anyway in front of the cameras at the worst possible moment, precisely so that its not coming down could be used. You did not stumble into a discourtesy, Mr. Sorrel. You went hunting for one, because a manufactured slight gives a man leverage at a signing table that an honest negotiation does not. The captain did not nearly cost us the morning. You tried to, and he would not let you. I have served 11 years, and I had never heard it said so cleanly. I kept my eyes forward as I had been trained, but inside I felt something settle into place that had been loose since the cobbles. The knowledge that the truth, told first or told last, had landed where it needed to. Lady Marwen rose. That more than anything said ended it. When the steward stands, the audience is over. Mr. Sorrel, your principal is our welcome guest and will be treated with every honor this house possesses, of which there are a great many, and I will personally see that he leaves delighted. But the word insubordinate will not be attached to my captain's name today or ever, and if it appears in any account that crosses my desk, I will answer it with the page the clerk has just read aloud, sent to whatever office you sent your version. You are free to test which document the world finds more persuasive, your recollection of a courtesy that never existed, or 200 years of a household settled honor, written down in advance against exactly this morning. I would not advise the test. She inclined her head, courteous to the last. The reception continues. I am sure you will want to rejoin it. And that was the rebuff. No raised voices, no convoy at the gates, no spectacle. Only a room full of the household's own people, standing quietly behind one officer with the book open, and a careful man discovering that the lever he had flown in 2 days early to find did not exist and never had. Sorrel inclined his head a precise degree, said something correct about being grateful for the clarification, and left to rejoin a reception where, I am told, he was charming for the rest of the afternoon and never once mentioned the standard again. A man like that cuts his losses cleanly. It is the one thing I can respect about him. I thought then that it was finished, that the system had rallied, the order had died in the room where it was tested, and I would walk back down to the guardroom and stand my men down at last. And in the largest sense it was finished. But there was one more thing the morning had to give me, and it came from a direction I had not been watching, and it is the part I remember best of all. Lady Marwen called my name as I turned to go. "Captain, a moment more." She waited until the room had thinned, the clerks gone, the chief of protocol gone after Sorrel to make sure the afternoon stayed smooth, only the colonel and the archive man and I left with her. Then she came around the table and stood close, and the official quiet went out of her voice and something plainer came in. "You were prepared to lose your post over this," she said. "It was not a question. Wren told me how you came up the stairs, in your forecourt order expecting to be broken, and you gave him the full account anyway, sharpest word and all, when softening it would have saved you." She studied me. "Why did you not soften it? You are not a reckless man, you knew the odds." "Because the order was not reasonable, Lady Marwen," I said, "and if I had let it be called reasonable even to keep my post, then I would have spent the rest of my service standing a carpet whose standard could be talked down by the next confident man who picked the right moment. I did not want to hand that to my successor, and I hesitated, then said the true thing. There was a boy holding it. If I bent, he bent. I would not make a 19-year-old carry my surrender." She was quiet for a moment. "Ensign Pell," she said. "The chief of protocol mentioned him too. Apparently the boy tried 3 times to get a message up to this room while you were on the stairs, insisting that whatever happened, the captain had been protecting the colors and not himself, and that if anyone was to be disciplined it should be the standard-bearer who could not hold steadier." A faint smile. "He was turned back at every door, of course, but he tried. You have trained him well, Captain. He understands what he is carrying. That is rarer than steadiness." I will admit that landed harder than anything Sorrel had thrown at me all day. The boy had tried to take it onto himself. 19 years old, white to the lips, certain he was about to watch his captain broken, and his first instinct had been to climb the stairs and offer himself instead. That is the whole of the thing, really. The standard does not stay up because of any one of us. It stays up because of what it grows in the men who carry it, and because when one of us refuses to let it fall, the others come and stand behind him, all the way up the chain, until a man with a sash discovers he is not arguing with a captain but with 200 years. "Go back to your post, Captain," Lady Marwen said. "Stand your men down, and tell your ensign that the steward of the household says he held the standard well this morning, both halves of it, the silk and the meaning. He will understand which I mean." I came to attention and I went. I will tell you the rest quickly, because the rest is the part the drill is really about, the return to the post, unchanged. I came down through the household and out into the forecourt, and the men were still in their 2 ranks on the cobbles, holding, because no one had stood them down, and a guardsman does not stand himself down. 40 pairs of eyes did not move toward me because they are trained not to, but I felt every one of them ask the question as I crossed the carpet. Did it hold? Did we hold? And at the head of the line, the standard was still up. Ensign Pell had carried it the whole time I was in the steward's room, through every minute of not knowing whether his captain was being broken upstairs, and it was as vertical and as true as it had been when the visitor's flag passed beneath it. He had not let it drop a hair while he waited to learn whether holding it had cost me everything. I walked to the head of the line and stood my proper distance and gave the order to stand down, and the 40 came off attention as one. And only then, in the small private moment a captain is allowed at the end of a state mourning, did I turn to the boy. "Ensign Pell." Sir, his voice cracked on the single word. He had been holding more than the pole. The steward of the household sends word, I said low, so it was only between us and the standard. She says you held the colors well this morning, both halves of them, the silk and the meaning. I let him have a second to understand it. Do you understand what she means by the second half? He looked up at the crimson and gold above him, 12 feet of it against the gray sky, the silk that had not bowed to the Verandan flag, that had not come down for a sash and a quiet order and a manufactured slight, that had stood through an arrival and a complaint, and a reading of an old book it had never needed to hear because it had been telling the truth all along. The boy's eyes were wet, and he did not let them spill, because he was on the cobbles and in red, and he understood that too. I think so, sir, he said. It means the standard doesn't come down because we're brave. It comes down for no one because we already decided that a long time before us, and we just don't get to be the ones who break it. I had been an officer for 11 years, and I do not think I had ever put it that well. Carry it back to the guardroom, ensign, I said, carefully. You've earned the walk. He carried it across the cobbles with his chin up and the whole forecourt watching, and the public at the iron screen, who had seen the flawless arrival and none of the war behind it, who would never know there had been a war at all, pressed their faces to the bars and watched a 19-year-old walk an unbowed standard home, and some of them, not knowing why, took their hats off. That is the end of it, more or less. The accord was signed 2 days later. I am told the principal, the heavy genial man, was indeed delighted by his whole visit, and that at the signing he remarked to Lady Marwen that he had never been received with greater honor anywhere, and that he had particularly admired the discipline of the forecourt guard, those splendid still men, he is supposed to have said, and that magnificent standard they keep so high. He never knew his own head of protocol had spent an afternoon trying to bring it down. I think, if he had known, he would have been ashamed of it. Some men are bigger than the staff who serve them. Sorrel left with the delegation, and I never saw him again, and the word insubordinate never appeared on any page that reached the household. Lady Marwen had seen to the page that would have answered it, and a careful man does not pick a fight he has been shown, in advance, that he will lose. People ask me when they hear a version of this, whether I was afraid on those stairs, afraid of losing the post I had given my life to over a square of silk. I tell them the truth, which is yes. I was afraid the whole way up. The discipline is not the absence of the fear. The discipline is climbing the stairs with it and giving the full account anyway, sharpest word and all, because the alternative is teaching the standard to bow. One reasonable surrender at a time, until there is nothing left up there worth the carrying. I still stand the forecourt. The standard is still up. A different ensign carries it now. Pell is an officer himself these days, with his own carpet and his own quiet voices to refuse. But it is the same silk, the same 200 years, the same 4 lines in the old book against the same morning that always, sooner or later, comes again. And when a confident man leans toward me on the cobbles in a low, certain voice and explains the courtesy he expects, I think of the boy who tried to climb the stairs to take my fall, and of the steward who came around her table with the book open, and of the whole quiet household that closed ranks behind one refusal, so it would not be only a gesture. And I give him the same answer I gave Sorrel, in the same level voice, and I mean it more every year. Those colors do not dip. Not to a flag, not to a sash, not to the right moment chosen by the wrong man. They were lifted by men who decided, long before any of us, that there is one thing in this forecourt that bows to no one. We do not get to be the generation that lowers it. We only get to be the ones who hold it up, and when the moment comes, the ones who stand behind the man who will not let it fall.